The old man had been sitting in the same spot on the corner of Kwame Nkrumah Avenue and Liberation Road in Accra since 6:30 every morning for 11 months. He sat on a folded piece of cardboard, the kind that collapses into the shape of the body that occupies it, with his back against the low concrete wall outside the old post office building and his legs stretched in front of him, and beside his right knee he kept a small tin cup, once used for condensed milk, with a few coins already inside so that the sound of metal on metal would remind people who passed that the cup was real, and the need was real. It was 67 years old, and weighed, at his last measurement, 58 kilograms, which was 14 kilograms less than he had weighed 3 years earlier, and which his bones announced in the way that bones announce such things, in the sharpness of his shoulders, in the thinness of the wrist that rested on his knee. He wore a white kaftan that had yellowed at the collar over time, and a pair of brown leather sandals with the right strap repaired with a strip of electrical tape. Over the kaftan, regardless of the weather, he wore a faded navy blue jacket that had once belonged to someone taller, with 2 buttons remaining on the front and a pocket on the left side that he kept closed with a safety pin. His eyes were closed behind the dark glasses he wore, and had been closed behind dark glasses for 9 years. And the world on the other side of those glasses was the same darkness it had been every morning for 9 years. Total, steady, and completely without apology. His name was Kwadwo Mensah Asante. Nobody on Kwame Nkrumah Avenue knew this. To the man in the black Toyota Land Cruiser who passed him at 7:49 every morning, who had passed him 243 times between January and November without once slowing down, he was simply the old man at the post office corner, the one who didn't call out, the one who simply sat. That man's name was Chief Kolade Owusu Mensah. He was 54 years old, owned the 4th largest import and distribution company in Ghana, and had a driver named Ato, who took him along the same route every morning, out of the East Legon estate at 7:31, down the Tema motorway connector, through the Kwame Nkrumah Circle, left onto Liberation Road, right onto Kwame Nkrumah Avenue, and then 17 minutes along that road to the Cantonments District Office, where his company occupied floors 8 through 12 of a glass building that cost $6.2 million to construct and which his name was not on because he had never wanted his name on a building. On 244 mornings, Ato had slowed at that corner for the traffic light. On 244 mornings, Chief Kolade had been on his phone, or reading documents, or looking at the road ahead. He had not looked at the corner. He had not looked at the cardboard. He had not looked at the tin cup, or the dark glasses, or the navy jacket, or the man inside all of it. On the 245 morning, the phone was not in his hand. It was in the front seat, where Ato had placed it after the screen cracked against the console on the previous day, and where Chief Kolade had decided, while brushing his teeth that morning, to leave it until the office. So his hands were in his lap, and the light was red, and for the first time in 244 mornings, Chief Kolade Owusu Mensah had nothing to look at except the window and the street beyond it. He looked at the corner. The old man was not begging. He was not holding out his hand or gesturing toward the cup or making any movement at all. He was sitting with his back against the wall, with his legs stretched out, and his wrist resting on his knee. And his face was turned in the direction of the road with an expression that was not resignation, and was not suffering, and was not asking for anything. It was simply the face of someone who had decided, at some point that preceded this morning, by a long interval, that he would sit with what was and not make a performance of it. There was something about that stillness. Chief Kolade watched it for the 14 seconds before the light changed. He watched it the way a person watches something they have almost recognized. The light changed. Ato pulled forward. Chief Kolade said, "Stop the car." Ato stopped the car. Chief Kolade got out. He crossed the pavement, 6 steps, the morning air already carrying the smell of the roasted groundnut cellar. 3 stalls down and the diesel of the early buses, and crouched down in front of the old man. He sighed, "Good morning." The old man turned his face toward the voice. He said, "Good morning." "You are here every day," Chief Kolade said. "I am here every day," the old man said. Chief Kolade reached into the breast pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out the only cash he was carrying, 2 20-cedi notes folded together, and placed them in the tin cup. The coins in the cup shifted against each other. The old man's head moved slightly. He said, "Thank you." Chief Kolade stood. It was about to turn back to the car when the old man said, "You have been passing since January." Chief Colady went still. He said, "How do you know that?" The old man said, "The same engine, Toyota V8, 2019. Every morning between 7:48 and 7:51, you slow down at this corner for about 14 seconds." He paused. "You have not stopped before." Chief Colade looked at him for a moment. He said, "What is your name?" "Quaduo," the old man said. "Quaduo mensa asante." Chief Colade said, "I am Colade." He did not say the rest. He crouched down again. He said, "How long have you been here, on this corner?" 11 months, Quaduo said. "Before this corner, I was on the Circle. Before the Circle, I was on Farrar Avenue for about 8 months. I move when the area becomes difficult." "Difficult how?" "Security," Quaduo said. "Sometimes the city contractors. Sometimes just the way a place changes its mood." He said this without bitterness, as a man states geography. "Where do you sleep?" "There is a room I share with 2 others on Aboseo Kai Road, 800 cedis a month. I manage it." Chief Colade was quiet for a moment. The groundnut seller 3 stalls down was calling out now, her voice beginning the morning work of advertising. A trotro passed, and the exhaust rolled across the pavement and dispersed. He said, "You knew my car, by the engine." "I know most of the regular cars," Quaduo said. "It is something to do. You learn the patterns." He was quiet for a moment. "The silver Honda that passes at 8:03, the driver always changes the radio station at this corner. I hear it. The fuel tanker on Tuesdays and Thursdays, it downshifts before the speed bump, which means the driver knows the road. Small things." He stopped. "When you cannot see, you learn to listen for the small things." Chief Colade looked at the dark glasses. He said, "How long?" "Nune years," Quaduo said. "Glaucoma." It moved faster than the doctors expected. By the time I understood what was happening, it was already finished. "Were you working before?" There was a pause of perhaps 3 seconds. Not hesitation, but the pause of a man deciding how much of a thing to carry into a conversation with a stranger. Then Quaduo said, "I taught secondary school mathematics, 31 years. Prempeh College in Kumasi. I retired in 2012. I had my sight for another 4 years after that." He said the last sentence the way you say a fact about someone else, carefully, from a distance. Chief Colade did not say anything for a moment. He was thinking about 31 years. He was thinking about what a person is made of after 31 years of building something, and what happens to that architecture when the thing that sustained it is removed. He sighed. "Can I come back tomorrow?" Quaduo's head turned toward him with an expression that was not quite surprise, but was adjacent to it. He said, "I will be here. If you can feel where this story is going, stay with me. Because what happens in the next few weeks is not what either of these men expected." Chief Colade came back the next morning. He stopped the car at 7:49 and crossed the pavement and crouched down, and they talked for 11 minutes, which made Atto check the time twice from the driver's seat and say nothing. The morning after that, Chief Colade brought tea, 2 cups in a small thermos from his kitchen, and they drank it on the pavement corner. Chief Kolaji sitting on the low wall with his suit jacket over one knee, and Quaduo with the cup in both hands, and they talked about mathematics, which Chief Colade had studied for 2 years at the University of Ghana before switching to business, and which Quaduo talked about the way musicians talk about music, not as a subject, but as a language. By the second week, Atto had begun stopping the car at the corner without being told. What Chief Colade had not told Quaduo, and had not told anyone since it happened, was that his eldest son, a 26-year-old named Emmanuel, who had been studying architecture at Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, had been in a road accident the previous December that had left him with a spinal injury that the doctors described as significant. Emmanuel was alive. Emmanuel was in a rehabilitation facility in East Legon and could move his hands and his face and speak in the full, exact sentences he had always spoken. And he was doing what the doctors described as well. But he was 26 years old, and the life he had been building, the drawing board life, the late nights with the compass and the tracing paper, the future that had been so specific and so structural, had changed its shape completely. And Emmanuel had gone quiet in a way that was not clinical depression, according to the doctors, but which his father recognized as something the doctors did not have a precise name for. The silence of a person trying to find the outline of who they are now, that the outline they had is gone. Chief Khaled had been passing the blind man on the corner every morning for 11 months. He could not have told you on the 244th morning why he had never stopped. He could not have told you on the 245th morning either, except that his phone was in the front seat, and his hands were in his lap, and the light was red, and for the first time he had nothing to look at except the window. He could not have told you that he was looking for something, but he had been. By the third week, he had a question he had been working up to, and on the morning of the 18th day he asked it. He said, "When you lost your sight, the adjustment. How long did it take before you found a way to go on that worked?" Quadwo was quiet for a moment. He wrapped both hands around his cup. He said, "There was a woman at the hospital, a nurse named Ama Boateng, very small woman, about 60. And she had a way of speaking that was completely direct, which I appreciated because everyone else was speaking to me as though I were also losing my mind." He paused. "She sighed to me, 'You are not starting over. You are translating.' And I did not understand that for a long time, maybe 2 years. I kept trying to do the things I had done before in the way I had done them before, and failing, and reading that failure as evidence that it was finished." He stopped. "Then, one morning, I understood what she meant. Translating. The thing you are is not the form you expressed it in. The form changes. The thing does not." Chief Khaled set his cup down on the wall. He said nothing. Quadwo said, "Is there someone you are asking this question for, or is it for yourself?" Chief Khaled said, "My son." Quadwo nodded slowly, the nod of a man observing information that makes sense of earlier information. He said, "How old?" 26. "And he cannot see a way forward. It cannot see the shape of it." Quadwo said, "Bring him." Chief Colade looked at him. He said, "Here, to the corner? If he can come." Quadwo said, "If not, you tell me where, and I will come." He said this as a simple statement, the same tone in which he had said he would be here tomorrow. Chief Colade sighed, "He cannot travel easily." "Then I will come to him," Quadwo said. "Tell me the day." There was a particular silence that followed this, the kind that is not the absence of words, but the settling of them. Chief Khaled reached into his jacket pocket and took out his card and then remembered, and placed it instead in Quadwo's left hand, and said, "This is my number and the address. I will arrange a card for you." Quadwo turned the card in his fingers. He ran his thumb across the raised lettering. He said, "Is there a title on here? You have never told me what you do." "Import and distribution," Chief Khaled said. "And the title?" "Chief Executive." Quadwo sighed. "And all this time you have been sitting on a concrete wall at 7:30 in the morning drinking tea with an old blind man." "The tea is from my kitchen," Chief Khaled said. "It is good tea." Quadwo smiled. It was a full smile, the kind that is not performed, and it changed the geography of his face completely. He said, "Wednesday." "Wednesday," Chief Colada said. The driver who took Quadwo Mensa Asante to the rehabilitation facility in East Legon on the following Wednesday was Atto, who had been instructed to arrive at the Abosiokai Road address at 9 a.m. and to treat the journey with the same attention he gave every journey. Atto arrived at 8:57 and waited, and at 9:01 Quadwo came out of the building in his white kaftan and navy jacket. With a wooden walking stick he had not used on the corner because the corner was familiar, and his dark glasses, and a small cloth bag over one shoulder. In the bag was a mathematics textbook, not for Emmanuel, or not only for Emmanuel. Quadwo had been carrying that textbook for 6 years. It was a Cambridge A-level text, second edition. The cover held together with a wide rubber band, and when people asked him why he carried it, he said it was because it helped him think. When Atto glanced at it from the driver's seat, he did not ask. What Quadwo had not told Chief Khaled, what he had not told anyone except the woman named Amabo Teng at the hospital 9 years earlier, who had received the information and said nothing, and then squeezed his hand once and released it. Was that before the glaucoma? Before the retirement? Before the 31 years at Prem College, he had written a mathematics paper, not published it, written it. Each sat in a folder in the same cloth bag with the textbook printed on paper that had yellowed and softened at the edges from being unfolded and refolded over 9 years. It was a paper on spatial reasoning and pattern recognition that he had been working on since 1994, that he had completed in 2008, that he had submitted to a journal in 2009, and received a response that said the findings were promising, but the methodology required further development, and that he had intended to revise and resubmit in 2014, which was the year the darkness came too fast. He had not stopped thinking about the paper. He had revised it, in his mind, every week for 9 years. Every revision was precise and complete. He had no way to write any of it down. Emmanuel Osu Mensa was sitting in a chair by the window of his room when Atto brought Quadwo through the door. He was 26 years old, with his father's width through the shoulders and his mother's quietness around the eyes. And held himself in the chair with the particular stillness of a person who has learned that economy of movement is a form of intelligence. There were architectural drawings pinned to the wall beside the window, not from before, but new ones, done by hand, small and precise, the kind done by someone who is not yet ready to show them to anyone, but cannot stop making them either. Quadwo could not see the drawings, but he turned his face toward the wall when he entered. He stood there for a moment. He said, "Something is on that wall." Emmanuel said, "Drawings. Architecture?" "Yes." Quadwo sat in the chair his father had placed near Emmanuel's. He set the cloth bag on his knee. He said, "Your father tells me you studied at Must." 3 years, Emmanuel said. "Before." Quadwo sighed. "What does the wall look like?" "The drawings? Describe them to me." Emmanuel was quiet for a moment. He looked at the wall. He said, "A community library, low roof, wide windows, local timber columns, the kind of building that doesn't announce itself." Quadwo sighed, "Why a library?" "Because a library is a room that gives people a way in when every other door is closed." Quadwo Mensah Asante sat with that for 3 seconds. Then he said, "Reach into my bag. Left side. There is a folder." Emmanuel reached in and took out the folder. He opened it. The pages were soft from handling, and the text was dense and margined with handwritten notation. And at the top of the first page it said, "In the confident heading of a man who has been thinking about something for 14 years, spatial intelligence and non-visual pattern recognition, a framework for architecture beyond sight." Emmanuel read the title. He looked up. He said, "You wrote this?" "I started writing it in 1994, Quadwo said. "I finished it in 2008. I have been revising it in my head since 2015. I have no way to put the revisions down." He was quiet for a moment. "You can draw. I have been told you are still drawing even now." He turned his face in the direction of the wall. "A library that doesn't announce itself. A room that gives people a way in when every other door is closed." He said, "I think we could help each other." Emmanuel looked at the pages in his hands. He looked at the man across from him, the navy jacket, the electrical tape on the sandal strap, the dark glasses, the mathematical textbook held against the knee with the grip of someone who holds it because it is part of the weight of himself. He looked back at the pages. He said, "What are the revisions?" Quadwo told him. He spoke for 47 minutes without stopping. Anne Emmanuel listened and turned pages, and when he needed to write something down, he wrote it in the margin with the pencil he kept on the windowsill. And outside the window of the rehabilitation facility in East Legon, the traffic moved along the road below with the usual Tuesday morning steadiness. And Atto waited in the car in the parking area and drank the rest of the tea from the thermos and did not interrupt. Chief Collet did not come that first day. He had arranged it that way deliberately. He had understood, without being told, that his presence would change the room. He received a text from Atto at 11:53 a.m. that said only, "Still inside. Should I wait?" He replied, "Wait." Atto waited until 1:14 p.m. when Emmanuel and Quadwo came out to the parking area together. Emmanuel in his chair, Quadwo beside him with a walking stick, the cloth bag over his shoulder and the folder now back inside it, and Emmanuel carrying 3 pages of margin notes he had written during the conversation. Emmanuel sighed something to Quadwo at the car door. Atto, who was standing nearby, heard only the last part. "Same time next week?" Quadwo sighed. "I will be here." The paper, revised and completed over a period of 6 months of Tuesday meetings in East Legon, was submitted to the Journal of Architectural Theory and Practice in the following September under the names K.M. Asante and E.K. Owusu Mensah. It was accepted without revision in November, published in the January issue. and cited 11 times in its first year by researchers working on accessible design and non-visual spatial cognition. It was the first paper either of them had published. It was the first time in 9 years that Cuadro Mensa Asante had been able to put the revisions down. In the same November, Chief Colad arranged for a room, not charity, but a formal arrangement, a fixed rent at a figure both men agreed on, in a small guest house in Labone, 3 kilometers from the rehabilitation facility, which meant that Cuadro no longer commuted from Abose Okai Road for the Tuesday meetings and no longer split the rent on a room with 2 other men who kept different hours. The room had a window that faced east. Cuadro did not tell Chief Colade this was significant. Burge rose every morning at 5:30 and opened that window and stood in the morning sound of the street below. The groundnut seller who set up at the corner. The school children who passed at 6:45. The engine sounds he had learned to sort the way a librarian sorts a new delivery. And it was, in the specific and private grammar of his own life, the beginning of something that had the same shape as what he'd lost, even though its form was entirely different. It was not starting over. He was translating. The last time Chief Colade stopped at the corner of Kwame Nkrumah Avenue and Liberation Road was not the first time, and it was not the 245th. It was on a Thursday morning in the following March. Nearly a year after the morning, he had left his phone in the front seat and looked out the window for 14 seconds at a man who was simply sitting with what was. It stopped because he passed that corner every morning, and it was part of what a morning was now. Atto no longer needed to be told. The car slowed at 7:49, and Chief Colade opened the door and crossed the pavement. And the cardboard was there, and the tin cup was there. But Cuadro was not, and the pavement was empty, and the low concrete wall had nothing against it. And for a moment, Chief Colade stood on the corner, in the morning air. The groundnut seller 3 stalls down. The diesel of the early buses, the sound of the city arranging itself into the shape of another day, and he stood very still. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. He answered. Cuadro sighed, I am at the facility. Emmanuel's paper is being cited again. He wanted me to be there when we heard. A pause. I thought I was going to be on the corner this morning. The driver came early. Chief Colade stood on the corner with the phone against his ear and the empty cardboard at his feet and said nothing for a moment. Then he said, I will come. I went back to the car. He said to Atto, East Legon. Atto pulled into the traffic. They passed the old post office building and the low concrete wall and the corner where an old man had sat every morning for 11 months. And Chief Colade looked at it as they passed and then looked at the road ahead. He had been passing it for 244 mornings without seeing it. He had needed one morning with nothing in his hands to look out the window. The world does not always show you what it is standing in the presence of. It moves too quickly. It has somewhere to be. It has a phone in its hand and documents on its knee, and 17 minutes to cover a distance it has covered so many times that the road has become invisible. But occasionally, the phone is in the front seat. The hands are in the lap. The light is red, and it stays red for 14 seconds. And in those 14 seconds, a man turns his face toward a window and sees something he has been passing for nearly a year. And that seeing changes the direction of everything that follows. Not dramatically, not with any announcement. The light changes. You stop the car, you cross the pavement, you crouch down, you say good morning. That is all it takes, but it requires the 14 seconds, and it requires that the hands be empty. Consider this, if you drove the same road every day for a year, and every day you passed someone sitting at the same corner, someone who was watching the patterns of your life more carefully than you had ever watched theirs, what would it take for you to stop? Would it take a broken phone? A red light that lasted 1 extra second? Or is there a corner you are already passing every morning where something is sitting quietly that you have not yet allowed yourself to see? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to read it. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.